Please give a warm welcome to Dani Blum, health reporter, and her guests, Lisa Damour, psychologist and author, and Gabriela Nguyen, founder of Appstinence.
Perfect. Hi, thank you all so much for being here. I am Dani Blum. I am a health reporter at the New York Times, and I'm here to talk about something that is probably on a lot of our minds, which is setting digital boundaries and protecting our happiness at a time when we are constantly tethered to our phones and bombarded by social media. So I have an amazing panel here to discuss this. I am joined by Dr. Lisa Damour. She is a clinical psychologist and the author of several best-selling books on parenting. She is also the co-host of the Ask Lisa podcast. So please give it up for Dr. Damour. Thank you. And I am also thrilled to have with me Gabriela Nguyen, who is a student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the founder of a group there called Appstinence, that's with 2 P's, which encourages people in Gen Z in particular to get off of social media. So let's give it up for Gabriela. So thank you both so much for being here. I want to start with a big picture question, which is, what do we really mean when we talk about protecting our happiness in the age of the internet? And maybe, Lisa, we can start with you. Can you explain what is happening psychologically that makes us feel so bad when we're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling?
So this is a question we've really been looking at hard from the research perspective. And largely we look at adolescent mental health questions, but we have some data on adult mental health questions that mirrors what we see with teenagers. And what we see is that it's a mixed bag. That social media is not all good or all bad. It's all of those things at once. And in my experience, it's often post by post, right? You see one post and you're like, yeah, and then the next post you're like, oh, right? And so part of what makes it hard to study is actually it's all mixed in together. I think where we get ourselves in trouble with these happiness questions is that it robs time in a way that we don't mean for it to. That the algorithms that are underlying these platforms are so extraordinarily powerful. They're working with so much data about us that they can put in front of us even enjoyable things that we just can't pull away from. And so much of the frustration is, did I really just mean to spend 20 minutes looking at folding videos, right? So I think that that's the challenge so often.
Yeah, definitely. Gabriela, does that resonate with your experience as well?
I definitely would say so. So to give a little bit of context, I was born and raised in the Silicon Valley. I was born in the 2000s, so smartphones and social media are essentially all I've ever known. And it wasn't until I left social media and departed with my smartphone that I created that kind of point of reference that you're referring to, Lisa, that forces you to ask very difficult questions, especially very important ones to ask early on in your life, which is, what's the value of time? What are the meaningful relationships that I care about? What does it mean to be a human being? All these different things, being able to answer those questions in the digital age is the absolute core of what it means to use technology in a meaningful way. If you skip over those questions and get immediately to the kind of technical changes, or like what's the best app to use for this, or the best smartphone, or the best whatever other device, if you skip over those initial questions, you'll be hitting a wall every single time.
Yeah, I think that's a really important perspective to keep in mind, that it's about reflecting on how you use technology. And so I guess my question to both of you is, are there beneficial parts of social media? How do you tell what is actually adding to your life and what is just sucking away your time?
I think there's no question there's benefits. I think that so many of us have friendships that we've been able to make. Actually, I have friends I have made in online environments who have become friends in my life who I really care about. I think for so many of us, it's a way to stay connected and build connection with people that we already know. And that's enormously valuable, right? When we look at the research, it's all about relationships. Relationships are everything. So if we go with that as the model, that's, I think if we just center that, are we getting deeper and better relationships as a function of our digital lives, or is it undermining our relationships? And I think that's the challenge, is that it can undermine our relationships with our people around us. So if we can use it to build relationship, get information we care about, fantastic. But it should never, ever get in the way of the people right in front of us.
How do you tell when it's getting in the way?
I think, it's interesting. We call it phubbing, right? When you are looking at your phone and ignoring people. And we know it's getting in the way. We actually have some data showing that while it's sometimes murky, the questions of adolescent mental health with regard to their technical use or media use, kids whose parents are phubbing them a lot, they have mental health concerns that we worry about. So I just think we have to be careful. We just have to watch it. We have to know where our phones are and why they're there.
That makes sense. Gabriela, do you also have guidance for people who are trying to figure out what is harming them, what's helping them when everything just sort of comes from the same screen?
Yes, I want to backtrack a little bit on that question in some sense and reframe the menu of options that we have available to people. So I brought a little show and tell, I think, because I anticipated this question. But I want to first say that social media and smartphones, the social norm that we have right now, it is optional. We have the ability to change this social norm. It is not fixed. It's coming from above. Like, it's coming from very powerful forces, but we have the ability to question if this is the way that we want to live. And I would assume that this isn't the way that we want to live. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be talking about this on this stage right now. So I wanted to show a couple different things. There's amazing companies that are cropping up, not sponsored at all, don't get anything out of this, who are creating alternatives to phones in various different types. There's the light phone, there's like the Nokia flip phones that were out when I was a kid. This particular phone, the Cat S22, it's a smartphone, but it's a flip phone. So I guess you technically could doom scroll on this, but the idea being that you have the actual agency to change the hardware that you use in your day-to-day life, and not actually assume that you have to operate within the narrow window of using a smartphone and having all the different social media apps to be able to operate as a full human being.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I guess my next question, though, is for people who are not at that point yet, right? They can't give up their iPhone. They have to be on demand to a certain extent for work or, childcare, friendships, etc. What are some realistic first steps to rethink your relationship with social media? Maybe, Lisa, we can start with you.
So I think the first thing is to just try to evaluate, is this making my life better, deepening my relationships, or is it getting in the way? And what's the use that's doing that? The next thing I will say, and I could talk about this at great length, so I'll try to keep it short. Psychologists love routines. Routines are how we say what we care about. If it's in your routine, you care about it. And so we want to be really deliberate about our routines. And so I would say if people are looking to make a change, I would say make a routine around when you use social media, what it's for, what time you do it, how long. And the beauty of routines is they also reduce decision making. And decision making is enormously cognitively taxing. So say, for instance, we were to say, leave here and say, okay, my new routine is I'll look at social media 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, and you know where it is in your routine. Then you're not spending all day thinking, should I do it now? Is this the right time? And that's of value. So those are the kinds of things that can make a difference. And then the last thing I would say, if you're really trying to make a change, right, so put it in your routine. I would tell somebody you're doing it. Sometimes having an accountability buddy gets us further along. But the most important thing, if you fall off the wagon, just get back on the wagon, right? I think sometimes we make a plan, we make a resolution, and then we blow it, and we're like, forget it. You can get back to it. And so if you do what you plan to do 7 out of 10 days, you're going to have a better experience. It doesn't have to be perfect for it to make your life better.
Is there anything you would add to that, Gabriela?
What I would add is valuing specifically continuity in your life. And that's like sort of a general theme, but I'll try to make it less abstract. Focus is continued attention. And your best friend is a continued friendship that got really deep. So in what ways is the technology that we're using, whether it's social media, whether it's all the various other categories of attention fracking and what have you, how do those operate specifically for the theme of continuity? For example, we have cameras recording this right now, but because you want to keep the continuity and allow tons of other people to be able to focus on this conversation we're having, that's a great use of technology. There's many other ways that the smartphone that you carry in your pocket, which if you're not going to switch off the phone, although I do want to say that it's considerably easier than you might anticipate. If you told me when I was 13 and got my first iPhone that not that many years later I would detest having one, I would have been indignant, okay, to put it very lightly. But now I've completely made that transformation. I really do encourage people to kind of move past that point where you're like a little bit afraid, and I don't want to give the cliche of embrace the discomfort, but there is a certain meaningful friction in that experience that forces you to answer the questions that I first said at the beginning. But to answer, I guess, the original question, if for whatever reason it is you don't do that, I think removing the things that interrupt the continuity, so disabling notifications, figuring out if what you carry in your pocket is something that you have to do right now. Is that email so important that you have to interrupt dinner, for example? Is that in the continuity of spending time with your family? Those would be the main ones, and creating physical distance as well from your phone. So go for phone-free walks, or if you know that don't take it with you when you would take out the trash, even though people always keep their phones on them for literally everything, but you won't need your phone when you take out the trash. I can absolutely promise you that's the case.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you brought up, right? It's not just social media apps that are warring for our attention or getting in the way of these, patterns of continuity. I think that social media gets a lot of oxygen in this conversation, but the rest of the internet is also vying for our attention, trying to interrupt us when we're taking out the trash. And so I guess my question for both of you is, when it comes to the internet writ large, this massive thing, how do you tell what is harming you more than it's helping you?
I think we have to tune into ourselves. I think there's already been conversations on this stage this morning about really being present in one's own body and getting a sense of how one feels. And I think that we can do that around technology and know what's of use. I think there's also ways in which it just becomes the default activity. I will do this myself. I have a minute, I'll check my email, right? Who knows what I'm going to find? And so I think we do, and I think Gabriela's got good suggestions, do have to be very serious about not letting it be the default, being intentional about where our time and our energies go. The other thing I will say is that there's huge value in an unbusy mind. There's huge value in what we call soft fascination, which is when you let your mind have enough open space that it can wander wherever it needs to go. And so it's when we're doing things that are sort of boring or routinized and we don't actually turn to technology. So it's like going for a walk or washing dishes, listening, gardening. When we don't fill that space with technology, the mind does incredible things. It actually goes in and finds what I call to go to a technological term, all the open tabs in my mind, all the things that I had forgotten. So to your point, I do a lot of exercise walking, and I make myself leave my phone at home. And it's hard. It's hard, actually. But within 2 blocks, I'll be like, oh, that's how I should write that email to that person that felt a little tricky. And then on the next block, I'll be like, oh, that person's birthday's coming. I almost forgot. It is only in that open space, only when we leave that bandwidth available, that we actually clean up mental clutter. And so the way I would approach your question, this is a long way around, in terms of making our lives better and not worse, we have to be honest about the fact that every time you turn to your phone, you're opening a new mental tab. You're adding to your mental clutter. Eventually, that's exhausting. So set aside time to clean up that clutter. Set aside time to wash dishes in silence. I now drive in silence most places, because we can always put on a podcast. We can always put something on. And by the time I get to my destination, I feel better.
Yes, actually, what I'll say is actually to build on what you're saying, Lisa, and I think we do have to go back to the technology a little bit. I think it is really important to reiterate my very first point that you address the actual technology that you own, because in some kind of kind of ironic way, what is removing you from having the mindfulness that is necessary to have that reflection of what is it that I care about, having that thought of what was that piece I was working on and what point did I want to make, is that the phone in your pocket is also going to interrupt you doing that, even if the thought is about, how could I spend less time on my screen? Wait, hold on 1 second. And then you take it out. And it's this sort of great irony that many of us, I'm sure in the crowd, myself included, no saint here, saying this from the confessional, have done a million times over many, many years. And so being able to actually change the hardware, I want to reframe it that it's not a resignation when you decide to change the technology that you use. I want to, it's really an act of agency, especially in an economy, in a attention economy where who's controlling what it is that you're seeing, you don't know these people personally. It's so important that you employ that for yourself in the same way that, like, looking at this crowd right now, everyone's wearing like amazingly different outfits. Not everyone's wearing the same thing and probably got here a million different ways, plane, car, whatever. And having that amount of variation, I think, is really important, not just for young people especially, but every single person, because these themes of not being able to have that focus and that mindfulness, that exploring that inner world is something across all generations. I see even my work directly, who joins this organization, or our youngest member is late, sort of early, mid-Gen Z probably, and then our oldest members are in their 60s and 70s, all struggling with the same 3-4 things.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, what you said about the wonderful variety here, one of the things, since my work is a lot on teenagers, but I think this applies to adults as well, what we have to remember is that social media can become a norm machine, that as soon as the algorithm picks up what we're interested in, you get tons of it. Absolutely tons of it. So if it's sports clips, cats videos, cute dances, fantastic, right? That might be making your life better. If it's you need to lose weight and this is how, or even things, I travel a lot, and I've seen a lot of people in the airports, women my age, in cream and white leisure suit outfits for travel, and I'm like, why would you travel in white or cream, right? I mean, that's a terrible idea. And I'm like, I know where this is coming from. I know where this is coming from. And so I think the other way to set this up is to think about what are the norms that are being brought to us all the time by the algorithm, and do we like those norms? Do we agree with these norms? Are these norms changing our lives for the better, or are they nudging us to things that really don't make sense? Plastic surgery, weight loss, cream-colored travel suits. I think there's a lot of ways that we want to just be really mindful here.
I do want to add, maybe push back a little bit on the mindless and the cat videos and those kind of things being in a separate category. I think if you're thinking of social media in the sense of what's social about it, there's also an element of mindless entertainment, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. But I think consuming mindless entertainment in and of itself is also a norm. This idea that, like, okay, I'm going to go home and chill. What is chill typically, right? So you go home, lay on your bed, look at your phone, on your laptop, what have you, scroll. That in and of itself has other norms that are perhaps not, maybe it's not necessarily a trend that it's pushing, but it's the idea of, like, looking into other people's lives when you really have no business looking into other person's life and making certain judgments about that person. There's like these sort of subversive other norms that come through in mindless entertainment that might, just looking at an individual TikTok, if you take a screenshot, it's like, okay, maybe it's not an ad necessarily, maybe it's something, there's all these other social norms built into it. I think that you have to be really cognizant about in your consumption.
Yeah, and I think part of what's so difficult, right, is that we are, if not chronically online, to use the phrase that's in the zeitgeist, we're all pretty much consistently or constantly online. And I think my question for both of you is, how do you assess when you are genuinely spending too much time online to the point where it's a problem versus just doing the bare minimum to keep up, to answer your emails and your Slacks and your FaceTimes and your texts? What is the difference between spending too much time online in a world that demands it?
Screen time, right, is a big topic with kids. It's a big topic with us. And what you're getting at, Dani, is, well, screen time's a lot of things, right? Screen time's my work. Screen time's my writing. Screen time's, talking to my kid in college, which is like the best, right? Because, I don't get to see her as much. So when we get to the question of, like, how much screen time is too much, I think there's two questions underneath that. One is the screen time productive or not, right? Is it useful or not? Is it part of our lives that is constructive or not? And then I think once we've taken care of that question, it's for the stuff that's optional, is it making us better? Is it making our life, not better people, not optimized? I think we can be really, down that road in a way that's not good. But is it contributing to our overall happiness? Is it actually enhancing our well-being? And I think that's the kind of the way we want to construct that question.
I think a sort of practical checklist thing that I've been doing lately, because being an adult now, it's email is the largest issue. There's just too many of them. Is doing a checklist from the morning. So for example, if I wake up at 8 o'clock, and then I can look throughout my day. And in a moment where I'm like, okay, I'm about to check my email at 7 o'clock, even though I said no email after 5, if I go back to this morning at 8 a.m., is this what I would have wanted to be doing right now? And I think thinking within the day and not having like the 5-year plan and the 10-year plan, just think about that day. It's Monday, maybe start of the semester or end of the semester. Okay, maybe it's okay for me to check emails a little bit later today because I had a late start, had a study group in the morning, something like that. And let it change day to day because realistically it does. I think setting like no email after 5 as a general rule of thumb is good, but make room for that change in your day, like catching a flight to get to this event, for example. Oh man, couldn't get to my email this morning. Okay, I'll do it tonight. It also alleviates the pressure of having to think about your screen time. It's one thing to have a low, healthy screen time, but it's also another thing to be preoccupied about having that low screen time. It's like, I would want to, eat healthy food, but I don't want to think all day about like, yes, I got all my macronutrients today. I want to have that mental room to think about other things, think about responses for this interview, all the various things you could possibly be thinking about.
Yeah, I love hearing these sort of specific tips, the way you guys actually structure your own boundaries with technology. And it's something that I've thought a lot about myself. I deleted all my social media a few years ago, and then I get my little screen time report every week, and I'm like, how did I really spend all that much time on my phone still? Because there's so much that's drawing our attention. So I would love to hear from both of you as concretely and specifically as possible, what are the boundaries that you set in your own lives with technology?
Okay, so this hasn't come up, but this is actually huge. It's about sleep. And when we look at the data on mental health and digital technology, we have reason to think often the bad outcomes we're seeing are probably being routed through sleep. That people have their phones in their rooms, people are in their beds looking at their phones. We know this is terrible for sleep. And as much as sleep is so boring and we know, it is the glue that holds human beings together. It is the absolutely most essential thing we can do. If you do nothing else in your life but protect your sleep, everything is going to get better. So I am not great about my phone. I'm with my phone a lot. I look at a lot of things. I have always been so hardcore about sleep. My phone charges in another room. We have kept a landline in case my folks or my in-laws need to call us in the middle of the night. Like they're the only ones with that number. Thank God. And I'm really, really rigid about that. And it's actually, I'm a pretty easygoing parent. I'm really rigid about it with my kids. Really rigid. So no phones in bedrooms. If it's already there and it's working and it's not interrupting anybody's sleep, fine. But better to not have it if you can do it.
I do a lot of the same things. I'll say that. For me, I would say probably two main things. The first one is when I changed my phone from a smartphone, I kind of sort of made it a non-issue. I don't have to worry about blue light too close to bed in that sense because I won't be in bed scrolling on anything. The other thing is, this wasn't kind of a hot take, I guess, but I don't read the news nearly at all. And instead what I do, and I 100% keep up with everything that's happening, but I displace what I would have read necessarily in an article or watched, I guess, as a TikTok with another person. And oftentimes, because of how intensely all the events that are going on impact the people in our lives, there will be someone who's going through that thing. So for example, changes in the administration, it's hurting a lot of international students in my class. And so to learn about all the things that were going on with international students, I would talk to international students. Hey, what's going on? And it builds a moment of connection. It contextualizes to my own life and gives me a sense of agency of okay, maybe I can't change the whole, all the rules that are happening, but I can help this one particular person who's going through these tough issues. And then in the case that there's any kind of iffy stat that they gave and I want to check, then I can look it up and fact check. But I think starting with getting the context of all of the news that we're reading from people that you the flesh and blood who are around you makes a really big difference in how you perceive the world and the level of optimism as well that you have over how much it is you can change it.
So we are almost out of time. Very quickly, both of you, if there is one thing you would like to leave the audience with, one small shift they can make in their relationship to technology, what would it be?
I'm going to double down on sleep. I think it is what is driving so many of the outcomes people don't feel good about with technology. It goes back to this basic thing. I'm just going to stick with it.
Gabriela?
I would double down on social media is optional. I know some people need it for work, but I would wager that a large portion of this audience has at least 1, 2, maybe 3 accounts they in an honest accounting couldn't entirely justify. And also, take the jump, change the hardware that you're using. It is not a resignation. It's a point of agency that we all need to employ in our lives. I believe in every single last person in here to make these changes and be optimistic about the direction that technology is going in a sense that with conversations that we're having right now with very curious and goodwill people like the audience out here, we can make substantial change and change the social norms that have been restricting us largely.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much. Loved having this conversation. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you all.